So that's kind of where my head is at for why I'm trying to justify to myself that I can do this, even though it's probably not the brightest idea I've ever had. But to be realistic, I'm not going to do it at least yet. There's a few reasons. Then the first is I want more seat time. I'm getting used to the car, but I am not 100% in tune with this car yet. Like I've said, 700 miles roughly that I put onto it. But if I were to go and do a road course right now, even if it wasn't a competitive situation and it was like a track day for like a learning experience, I can guarantee you that within the first 3 sessions, I would probably spin out and you'd find me having a picnic on the inside of turn 3. So while I'm getting used to it and while I'm getting more comfortable with it, the reality is I'm not at a point that I can still push this car to its limits, and I still recognize that this car's limits are well beyond what I'm capable of doing, and I want to be able to get the most out of the car before I put a bunch of money into it. Like I said, I want to have this car long term. I need to know what it does now before I increase that threshold for what it can do, because as I push the power limits, that threshold for danger kind of goes up. And as I said, with the head injury that I had a few years ago, that was pretty major. My realization of my mortality is a lot higher. So as your power level goes up, your threshold for what goes wrong also is a lot more real in a couple of ways. The first being that obviously with more power you can go faster more easily, so things just come at you more quickly, you have less reaction time. My reaction time just is not as good as it used to be. That's kind of the reality of the situation. So in the event something goes wrong at a higher speed, not only is it just more difficult to catch because you have more momentum, but you also just have less reaction time because there's just less time at a higher speed between you and whatever object you're about to hit. So that's the first reason I don't want to do this, is a little bit of self-control and wanting to learn the car a little better before I kind of increase that threshold, with the realization that I am very fragile and another major head injury will probably kill me. The second reason I'm not going to do this yet is finances. First of all, the car is not paid off. I've got a loan on it. I am still paying that off. And even though I'm trying to pay it off aggressively, I'm probably not going to have it paid off easily for the rest of this year in the best case situation if nothing in my life goes wrong. And I am a firm believer that you should not modify a car until it is paid off. I've said this repeatedly to people and probably in another video at some point. If you do not have a car paid off, it is pretty much not your car, it's the bank's car, and you're effectively renting it from them. That is my mentality, so it is not worth me putting money into this in case anything happens or I have other health concerns that come up, and for whatever reason I'm not able to afford it. Now fortunately, I've put myself specifically in a situation where I'm hoping that's not the case, but if something does decline with my health and I have to not pay for something, I'm gonna pay for my house, and that car I don't need because it is not my daily driver. That would be the first thing I sacrifice in that situation. Beyond that, like I said, $3,000 to $4,000 in parts for the modifications I'm looking at, and then if I go to forced induction, I can't see it being less than $10,000 to $15,000 by the time you work out the odds and ends and you do the cooling system upgrades and the clutch and all that. That's a lot of money to me, and I repainted my own wheels because I don't have that kind of money to just throw at a vehicle. So to me, that's an ultimate goal, but not one that I'm quite financially prepared for at this point in my life. The other part that ties into that is the long-term reliability. So I am worried about long-term operating costs. That's part of the reason why I bought this over some of the other competitors that I looked at. This is supposed to be one of the more reliable cars in this performance bracket. This is definitely a mistake that I have made in the past. I had a 2002 WRX and I modified it a lot more heavily than I ever planned to. I got a little carried away with my build, but as part of that, the reliability of the car suffered a lot. It was truly getting to the point before I sold the car that it was spending more time in the shop than it was on the road. And for me, you know, I like working on the car. I don't like needing to work on the car every single weekend to keep it running, because that just gets to be a chore and it's no longer enjoyable at that point. Now, I like to do my fun projects, repainting the wheels. That was fun for me. The ceramic coating, you know, that was a day or two. I think that was pretty fun, and I think the car looks great. Repainting brake calipers, I've done stuff like that. You know, quick projects that have a pretty instant gratification that aren't like, I need to do this to keep the car functioning. Those are projects I enjoy. When it gets to the point that every week I'm like, okay, now I popped the radiator, now I broke an axle, now I fried all of my spark plugs because my fuel was way too rich. You get into this situation where not only are you getting absolutely nickeled and dimed with these stupid parts that just collectively add up, but now you can't enjoy the car because it's not running. You're constantly having to worry about and schedule time to work on it. And then there's just that element of, oh, I think it's going to break all the time, so that you no longer enjoy driving it. And that's kind of where I was at with my WRX. Again, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like worried that something's going to break every time I hit the throttle and I just got to figure out what. So supposedly the cam and the exhaust and the intake, that will take it to a point that it's powerful enough, but not so powerful that I'm like snapping axles and blowing the clutch every 7 miles. But even so, just the possibility of it having come from a car previously that was in that realm, it just makes me hesitant, and I'm not sure I'm willing to take that dive yet until I've done a little bit more research, because I'm way over analytical about everything. Because I don't want to be in that situation again where I'm just afraid to drive it, because that sucked. Even if it was running fine that week, just the mental anguish of thinking something was going to break, that outweighed the benefit of driving it. So it just kind of sat. So at this point for me, even if I had the money right now to pay off the car and to do all the mods I wanted, I would still really have to do some research into the reliability, because that would be my biggest mental roadblock before doing anything to this car. And the other part that I already said I was worried about is ruining the drivability. So when I had my WRX, the exhaust I put on it was way too loud. The coilovers were a little bit low and a little bit too aggressively set up, so the ride wasn't really comfortable. And I lived about 2.5 hours away from my parents. I would still go visit them often enough. And then obviously I would take my dog with me when I did that, but I didn't want to put my dog in my Mustang because like that was my nice new car, so I always put him in the WRX. But taking a car like that for a 2.5 hour drive was miserable, especially for the WRX, because the AC broke for one summer, and that was not fun. Like, already having all the other issues was not fun, but then not having AC on top of that without it being a convertible, that was not fun at all. And that's what I'm worried about with the drivability, is I don't want to get to the point that I have a clutch that's so heavy that my leg is shaking trying to hold it at a stop sign or through a traffic light. As I've said in previous videos, my intent is to hold on to this car and just keep racking miles on it, and as part of that, I'm not going to rack miles on it if I think that it's miserable to drive. I want this to be something that I can take to work, that I can take out to dinner, that I can just go around and do fun cruises in. I want this to be something that I can use, and that's why I didn't buy the absolute lowest mile example in existence. That's why I didn't buy the nicest example in existence. I wanted one that was a little bit rough so that I wouldn't feel super bad about using it. And fortunately / unfortunately, I think that's what I got, and now I think I've made it maybe a little bit too nice, so I'm kind of self-inducing some of those fears. But the point being, if I thought it was too nice and it was miserable to drive, I definitely wouldn't put miles on it, and I definitely want to put miles on it. That is the whole point of me buying this car. Those are really the big reasons. I think I need a little bit more seat time. I need to get a little bit more acclimated to how the car handles at the threshold, so that I'm at a point where I can like comfortably track it. My sense of mortality is a little bit higher, so I don't want to needlessly raise that threshold until I'm ready for it. I'm worried about the drivability and the reliability, because I want to be able to enjoy this car and rack up the miles. And then the big one being finances, right? I need to pay off the car, and then I have to save up to actually afford the mods on top of that. With all this in mind, my preliminary research over the winter, because of course I had to look this up, I couldn't drive the car, so I had to do something. I think there is a cam package that is mild enough that it should maintain all of my goals, that isn't too expensive, like I said. Now, I am trying to very aggressively pay off this car. My goal is to have it paid off within a year of owning it. I don't think I'm gonna hit that, but even if I don't hit that, because I'm going so aggressively for this goal, hopefully I can pay it off, maybe 4 months or 5 months after that, even if I miss my initial target. I think that would still put me in a position where I might hopefully be able to afford some of the mods like over the winter or something next year, and then maybe I can install them next year while the car is down in winter storage. And then it'll kind of be the best of both worlds, where I just time it right, where I'm ready for the mods at that point, and I have the money available, hopefully. Even though really long term I would like to go forced induction at some point, I think my near term goals for the car are more revolved around like driving it and being able to track it and getting comfortable with it to that level. I think the forced induction would scare me a little bit too much to be able to track it, and beyond that, I just think the reliability would decline a little bit too much with how much it would heat soak, to the point that I don't know if it would survive track sessions with forced induction. But I think a cam package, especially a mild one, that should be able to survive the track sessions that I want to do, which are only 20 minutes, assuming that I keep the tune relatively conservative and that this thing isn't set to absolute kill mode 100% of the time. Like I said, I still plan to put a lot of miles on this car and have it for many years to come. So there you have it. That is why I kind of want to modify the car, why I absolutely cannot afford to do it yet, and when I foresee myself being able to do it, hopefully assuming that I haven't killed myself and scared myself too much and sold it. Because realistically, I am not a professional driver, I'm not going to be one anytime soon, and even though I don't inherently think the car is super dangerous, I am concerned for the longevity of my license, and I do definitely try to respect the power for this car because it is enough to get away from you, and I think there is a reason that it is known as a Widowmaker, and I'm not trying to prove it right. And with that, I'm going to knock on the closest thing I've got to wood nearby, but that is all I got for this episode. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.